Welcome to SEC Football Live, brought to you by ML Rose. I am Braden Gall, and that is David Nuno of Texas Aggies. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm great, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. First time I think I've had you on here, and I do appreciate you giving me some time. This is the time of year where we kind of go through the entire conference, little spring State of the Union, as you know, as we've got portal windows and recruiting and all this other changes to the roster that are happening. Of course, we don't even know who's going to be on the schedule next year and what the playoff format's going to be. So I do appreciate you giving us some time today. Of course, you can catch him, TexAgs, texags.com, TexAgs Live, of course, as well. So make sure you go give him a follow. And if you're a Texas A&M fan, obviously you know who he is. If not, he's a great resource. So go check him out. Go check out TexAgs as well. ML Rose in Nashville. I know when you guys come up here, Texas A&M doesn't play Vanderbilt very often, but when you guys come up here, we've got 6 great locations, the best craft beer in the city, the best burgers in the city, and according to my wife, David, the best ranch dip in the city as well, which is always a very important aspect to every great meal in Middle Tennessee, apparently. So,
well, I think I know where you're taking me when I get there.
Yeah, exactly. On the house, excuse me, I'm worked up. On the house, of course, as well. 6 great locations, the 7th opening this summer on the east side, so make sure you check them out. Of course, proud sponsor of SEC Football Live. All right, let me ask you first about some of the news that's been going on the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
I'm curious where Aggies fans or the Aggies administration falls on some of the issues. I'm sure you guys have been discussing this, but I'm curious. Playoff expansion, 9 conference games, automatic qualifiers, the Big Ten trying to buy their way into the playoff, by spots at least. Where are the fans on some of these issues? How do they feel about this stuff? Nobody asks them ever. So I want you to be the voice of those folks. Where do you think they are on all of that stuff?
It's interesting because I think we just want to get invited to whatever's happening now and then worry about the next phase, because since A&M has not been invited to the playoffs, and I think in 2020 they should have been, but that's been such a long time, half a decade. Wow, to say it out loud. But I think because A&M wasn't invited to the 14 playoff, because they weren't invited last year, and there's a reason for that. They floundered at the end of the year. They just want to make it in whatever it is right now, and then worry about the future. But I have mixed emotions because I like the regular season meaning something, and I feel like the expansion of the playoffs has obviously taken away from that. But as an SEC fan, and I think being an SEC fan has kind of gone through this kind of morphed recently, to where I would say when A&M and Missouri joined the conference, there was a lot of SEC pride and, you want to beat your rivals, you want to beat these teams, but when the SEC is playing anybody else, you want the SEC to win. And I don't know if that's still the case with the expansion of Texas and Oklahoma being in there, to where, Texas is a rival to A&M, and there's no way an Aggie's ever going to root for Texas to do anything well. And, I feel like a lot of the conference might feel the same way, to be 100% honest with you. It started last year at SEC Media Days. That being said, I personally like the 5 conference champions and the at-larges, because I want to see the best teams in there. There does have to be a provision for your strength of schedule. And I also do think, I'm going to talk out of 2 sides of my mouth here, Braden, but I do think what you do in the regular season, regardless of your schedule, should matter somewhat. Right, it should matter a little bit. Look, do I think Indiana would have lost to Alabama? 1,000%. But Indiana had the record, and Bama lost games that they shouldn't. So I think last year it made sense for Indiana to be in there, although I think Bama's a better team. But I do think it should matter, not regardless of your schedule, but I do think your schedule should matter. But you should be rewarded for doing well in the Big 4 conferences.
It's funny you go to the SEC pride thing, because when I got started in 2005 covering college football, I felt like the SEC chant from like Kentucky fan and from like South Carolina fan and from Vanderbilt fan and Mississippi State fan and teams that weren't playing in those games, it did feel kind of silly, and it kind of built to a crescendo during that like 9 championship straight run, of which right at the end, A&M and Missouri joined the league. I don't think that's there. I agree with you. I think by 2018, 1920-ish ballpark, I wasn't hearing those chants, because it's also sort of counterintuitive. If you're a Tennessee fan and Georgia's winning the championship or Alabama's winning the championship, and you're chanting for Alabama and Georgia, you're rooting against your own best interests.
Right.
And I never understood that.
But I also think there is still pride that our conference is better than the Big Ten. And I say our because I'm representing the SEC today. Hey guys. But because, the Big Ten has won the last 2 championships, right? And the SEC feels down, even though like they're still top to bottom, the best conference in all sports, right? Like baseball's gotten eliminated left and right. Would anybody be surprised if Tennessee wins it all again? No, I don't think anybody would. Florida ended up winning the basketball championship when all these teams. But from a football perspective, there is still like SEC for most of the teams. I don't know if all the teams.
I think that's probably fair. Where do you think Trev Alberts and Mike Elko? We know there's kind of a divide between athletic directors and coaches around the 9 conference games and the automatic qualifiers. Do you guys have any sense of how the university views those decisions moving forward? There's going to be votes on this stuff. Who knows when, but it's going to happen. I think if you follow the money on all this, you're going to get to the answer, which is 9 conference games. But I'm just curious, like, I think the 3 and 6, especially for a school like A&M and Texas and some of these big schools with lots of rivalries, I think the 3 and 6 model on a scheduling makes a ton of sense to be able to protect LSU every year, to be able to protect Texas every year, to be able to protect those big rivalries. Do you have any idea where the school is on that?
Well, I think it depends on who you ask. Most coaches don't want the 9 conference games, right? Because that's adding another more difficult game. But I do think people are saying the 3-6. I'm going to take a step to the left and be like to the left. Because as a fan, I want the Texas game, I want the LSU game, but I also want an easier path because I feel like A&M, like when they were in the SEC West, like every year is LSU, and it's just the constant battles against Alabama when they were, and now it feels like Texas has figured everything out, right? And they've got all this talent, and LSU, this is a very big year for Brian Kelly, and I'm using 1 year as an example because they've got to do it long term, but like as the easiest path, I don't know if I want to protect that. As a college football fan, I want to protect that, right? Because I want to see A&M beat Texas every single year, and I want to see A&M go to Baton Rouge and win for the first time since 1994. Like, I want to see that, and that adds to the. I really do think the fact that A&M and LSU have gone back and forth since 2018, the home team keeps winning that, I think adds to a rivalry because in the beginning of the A&M LSU series, at least from an SEC standard, LSU dominated, right? So the last few years has been fun to see the back and forth. So I do want to protect those. I think coaches want to protect those, but the coaches also want to get to the playoffs. And how do you get to the playoffs? Well, can we schedule Vanderbilt every once in a while? As we mentioned, me visiting Nashville at some point. I mean, that plays a part. But the big picture, you got to protect those rivalries because college football every day is becoming less the sport we grew up watching and falling in love with. We still love it. We're not going to give up on it, but it looks different.
I do think I know that the SEC is sort of like saying right now, like, hey, we're going to need some strength of schedule metrics put in there. I think that's considered, and I think it will be considered if they decide to go to 9 games. I think it will help them get into the tournament, not hurt them, to be honest, eventually. I think that's how, to your point about the sport looking differently. Can you give everybody, I wasn't going to ask you this, but since I got you here, I have long said that the A&M LSU rivalry is one of the most underrated in all of college athletics. There's cultural overlap after Katrina with all the different population trends. You've got history of baseball. It goes back way, way further than just 2012 joining the league. What does the LSU rivalry mean to A&M fans?
Well, it's interesting because this year, the A&M Texas game was the one that everybody wanted to watch. But in my opinion, the intensity in the town when LSU was here was way more intense than Texas. Don't get me wrong. I think everybody wanted the Texas game more, just as bad, however you want to phrase it. But there was an intensity to those two teams playing this year that I felt hours before the game. That like you could walk around. I was walking around Aggie Park, and I just felt like there was anger. There was excitement. It was a little bit of both, right? And the Texas one was like, hey, there's an old friend of mine that, when we play each other, we don't like, but hey, it didn't feel, and there was a couple of fights that almost happened I was actually streaming on the sidelines when there was a couple of fights that almost happened between players, right? I think Shamar Turner was involved in one of those. So it is and I think it's because A&M recently has done well against LSU, right? And when I say done well, football has won the home games recently. Basketball this year did well, and baseball won a series against them. Obviously, got eliminated in the SEC tournament, but they held serve for the most part against LSU, and I'm talking about this year. And I think that adds to the rivalry because a lot of my friends who cover LSU, when they lose to A&M, when T-Bob was still doing his thing, right? Like there was an anger. There was like, how dare they beat us? And I think that adds to it. And I think all the other things that you mentioned there, culturally, it's a different vibe. Look, I do love going to Baton Rouge. It's a different experience. And I do think coming to Kyle Field is a different experience that they appreciate, but it's depending on what side you're on, the good guys versus the bad guys.
Yeah, there's just so many SEC teams that are just close enough to be like really salty about it and to have all the other parts of your life overlap, and I think that's a big one with the I-10. I think we need a nickname for it, though. I've been working on the Gulf War. I don't know if that offends anybody, but I think the Gulf War is a pretty good name. You got the Civil War, you got the Holy War. I don't know why we can't have a good nickname for it. 2024, very successful. Certainly the end of the season, not how you guys wanted it to end, but I think that's to be expected with a first-year coach and sort of installing everything. What was the reason for the success in year one, implementing, a new culture, all the cliches that we use? What was it about Mike Elko's approach that allowed it to work quickly and not just, hey, Jimbo Fisher did have good players?
I appreciate you calling it a success because when you live it and you live through November, and I'll throw in the bowl game, the Las Vegas Bowl, you live that, your last image of the season feels like a failure. But if you're not in College Station hoping to get into the playoffs, even when you were, or to the SEC championship game, even on the last regular season game against Texas where you still had a chance, if you're not in this bubble, you can look like, hey, that was a pretty good first year for Mike Elko. And it was a really good first year for Mike Elko. I like Jimbo a lot. I do. But I do think the term I've used probably too many times is he lost his fastball. And I think he lost his fastball a couple of ways. A, he was a little bit too much set in his offensive philosophy, right? And I think we all saw that. And B, I think that his style did not work with the entrance of NIL, with the entrance of the transfer portal window, with all these 18 and 19-year-old guys that, now they're making this money. Like you got the number one recruiting class of all time. You had the fake report from Sliced Bread that A&M spent, millions of this and that, which was not the case. But that being said, it was chaotic across the street, and it was chaotic on the field, and it was chaotic off the field, and it needed a balance of the force, if you will. And that's what Coach Elko did. He came in, he established as close to an R.C. Slocum mentality as you can get, defensive minded. Now the defense had a lot of issues this year, which was surprising, but the strength and training room change with Tommy Moffitt, there was a different kind of just energy and effort that you felt through practice, through press conferences, that could not be sustained in November. And, they put the no in November, as Olin Buchanan, my partner, says. And that's really the truth because they just could not get it done. Now, there are reasons that I'm sure we'll get into those, Braden, but I'm glad you phrased it the way you did because to me, because I talk to fans every day, it felt like Aggie sports in general have had such a disappointing finish to all these seasons. Football, a disappointing November. Basketball up by 10 with 10 minutes left on Michigan to get to the Sweet 16. They flounder, and about Aggie baseball. I mean, regardless of how they started, they fixed it. Then they lost the Missouri series. They got swept, right? So, all those things I think go back to football, though, because football is what everybody, cares about. But those two things add to the football drama. Yeah. But they had a very successful first year, just a horrible finish. And if you want me to touch on the why, the horrible finish on the why behind it, a couple things. They had problems tackling all year long. Okay, that was a problem all year long. Their ability to get to the quarterback surprisingly struggled. I would say they did okay in the second half of the LSU game, and Marcel Reed took over that game. But there were several pockets throughout the season where they had a hard time getting sacks, and I haven't figured out the why behind that. They couldn't tackle, and then you lose two guys offensively. Your best offensive player, Le'Veon Moss, and he was clearly their best offensive player. And if he doesn't get hurt, I think they do make the SEC championship game. And I don't know where. I don't know if they win the Texas game, because the Texas game, they couldn't move the ball anyway. But
Auburn,
somewhere they win.
Yeah.
If be it the Auburn game, probably not the South Carolina game, because South Carolina had their number that day. But that's where he got hurt. But not only him, Chase Basantis, who was an incredible offensive lineman for them last year at guard. He was fantastic. If not their best, they're 1A, 1B. So you lose both of those guys in November. You can't run the ball anymore. Marcel Reed, I think, although he had his struggles, he exceeded all expectations of a guy that nobody thought would be the quarterback when the season started. And really, when Connor took back the position after getting, coming back in the Missouri game and lights out, kind of plays okay against Mississippi State, plays horribly against LSU. Nobody expected anything from Marcel, and I thought he was solid. Compared his numbers to DJ Lagway, they're very similar. Not saying they're the similar quarterbacks,
sure,
just numbers-wise.
Yeah.
So I think all those things are part of the reason they played bad, and A&M just hasn't figured it out. I think Elko's the guy to figure it out. This is a very tough schedule this year, manageable for SEC standards, but going on the road to Baton Rouge, going on the road to Austin, and go to South Bend, that is really hard for a team that during the Jimbo era didn't win a road game the last 3 seasons and won their first road game in 3 years this year against Florida.
We will discuss the biggest ML Rose fan allegedly in Texas in College Station. Marcel Reed, obviously huge ML Rose fan. We'll get to that in a second. The quote in our magazine at Athlon Sports about A&M, I thought there were 2 of them that were very interesting from other coaches in the conference. We allow them space to do it anonymously so that we get their truth and their opinion. The changes in that exercise have gone from personnel and scheme commentary to very much infrastructure, resources, athletic department, and culture and NIL and stuff. And this was the quote about A&M, 2 of them here that matter to me. Quote, they didn't finish strong, but the turnaround here was remarkable. You turn on the tape from Elko, and those kids are playing harder, smarter, and faster. That's coaching. That's culture. It's want to. That's number 1. I don't think you need to explain what happened at the end of the year. I think that's just the end of a first-year coaching staff situation where everyone sort of just runs out of gas, and you're not, the program is not there to the point yet, not just A&M, but anybody. And then here's the one I think is really interesting. Quote, Elko understands A&M, and eventually this could be the most physical, aggressive team in the league. I think that is a remarkable thing to say about a coach going into his second season. The weird part is, and this is where I'm really trying to figure out myself here, I kind of agree with it. I kind of understand where they're coming from and why Elko would be the guy to do this. Do they have the personnel? Is the roster in a position to take all the stuff that appears to be, that the coaching staff is doing and turn it into something that is maybe not championship level yet, but close?
I think that's the word. They're not there yet. And the reason is, look, the SEC, we did a whole segment today on why I think the SEC could be jumbled and there's going to be a chaotic year, and there's multiple reasons for it. Stability at quarterback position throughout the conference. Marcel Reed has to take a step forward this year for this team to do that. And we can talk about Marcel.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
He's got to take a step forward, but he showed me a lot of signs. He put A&M in position to win games towards the end of the year against Auburn, right? They took the lead with 2 minutes left, a game that they fell way behind. They came back and they had a chance to win at the very end. They had a chance to tie them in double overtime, but they dropped a 2-point conversion, unfortunately, and they ended up losing that game. Against USC in the Las Vegas Bowl, they take the lead on the final possession of the game, 2 minutes left, the defense lets them down, they end up losing, right? So Marcel, I think the perception around A&M as a program would be different if the defense, about Marcel, I should say, the perception about Marcel would be different if the defense held up their end of the bargain at the end of the year. Because just like Florida, what are we talking about Florida? The way they won at the end of the year. That's what DJ Lagway did. Yeah. Marcel Reed put them in position to win games with a minute or 2 left in multiple games. You take one of those, if not both of those games, how different are we talking about Marcel Reed? And the stats don't change. It's defensive plays that really made all the difference in the world. So, do they have the people to do it? I think, and the reason I say I think is because like most SEC teams, there are questions all over the place. I'll tell you where I don't have questions. I don't have questions on the offensive line, one of the top in the conference, if not the country. I don't have questions about the running back room. And here, my question is Le'Veon Moss as healthy as he was last year? All indications are he is, but you never know coming back from injury. Right. You got Reuben Owens, you got Amari Daniels, who basically started the last part of the year. So you've got one of the top running back rooms in the country, top offensive lines in the country. So where are the questions? Can Marcel Reed make the reads and the throws? That's the question. I got to see it. He made some really good throws last year, but he's got to be better. Are the wide receivers, is it an upgrade? Well, you lose Noah Thomas, who was really good, and I think he's going to do well at Georgia. But he wasn't the game breaker. Is Casey Concepcion that guy? He's been that guy in the past. Didn't have his best year last year at NC State. Is it a connection with the quarterback? Is it whatever it may be? Mario Craver showed signs as being a real dude. Terry Bussey was 17 years old, thought he was going to be a defensive back, turned into a wide receiver when the season started, and he's still trying to learn things. So if one of those guys or if two of those guys end up being real dudes, then I think offensively, they're going to be solid. Let's not forget this A&M team that struggled against Texas and struggled against Notre Dame to move the ball, led the SEC in scoring. So there is
two of the best defenses in the world. Like just
heck yeah. So but they did struggle and they couldn't pick up 4th and 1s, right? So and they didn't have Le'Veon Moss in the Texas game. That would have made a huge difference. And Chase Basantis again. So on the offensive side, I don't have as many questions. Okay. On the defensive side, I have questions. I think they have upgraded their defensive backs. Okay, I think they're going to be better at a defensive back. They better be. Will Lee was solid last year. He was really good. You team him up with I think a more veteran Des Ricks, Dalton Brooks, more of a veteran, Julian Humphrey coming from Georgia, who started 10 games last year. I think your defensive backs should be better. I got to see it, but I think they should be better. Linebackers are the same group, a little healthier. Torian York's getting a lot of love on social media recently. Scooby Williams had a great year and struggled with a knee injury from the first game of the season against Notre Dame. The question there is defensive line. You don't have the studs that you had last year, at least the household names. All right. But those household names, as much as I love them, from a production standpoint, from getting to the quarterback standpoint, they didn't put up the numbers we all expected. Nick Scorton was nice, but 5 sacks. He had 10 at Purdue last year. Shamar Stewart has been well documented. He didn't have a lot of sacks in his time at A&M. Great raw talent, wasn't able to put it together. So I think the question goes back to Elko, who's putting his hands on the defense more than he did last year. Last year, he was a CEO. This year, he's getting back to I'm going to call the defense. It's going to be my defense. If we're going to fail, we're going to fail because of me. And you look at his track record as a defensive coordinator throughout the years, what he did at Notre Dame, what he did at Texas A&M, what he did as a head coach in charge of the defense with Santucci at Duke. You look at all those things. If there can be a little progress, I don't even need a lot of progress, a little progress on the defense with what I think the offense is going to be. Yeah, this is a team that can compete. I still struggle because when you have a lot of ifs, Braden, that's too many questions to answer for all of them to hit. Yeah. But some of these I can take a leap of faith and say, this is why they should work. Let's see if it does work.
Well, one of the best things, one of the smartest things about good college football situations is a great coach is going to take sort of his identity, his philosophy, his belief in offense, and he's going to blend it with the talents and the strengths of the personnel. That's what every great coach does. I do think when you have an athletic quarterback who's smart, you got all the talent in the backfield, a great offensive line, and Colin Klein is calling the plays, I think you've got a nice blend of all of that stuff. On defense, it's funny that you mentioned that because we had a chance to talk with Shamar Stewart in Indianapolis at the Combine. Titans, of course, I covered the Titans as well here in Nashville, and they were very interested in a lot of the edge players, a lot of defensive linemen. And one of the things he told us was sort of we asked about his productivity. And one of the things he said to us, and I'm sure you guys talked about it ad nauseum in your market, but he basically was like, well, I had to stick to the confines of the defense, and the defense asked me to do this, and so I would do that. And sometimes that means someone else got some of the shine or whatever. And it's sort of a double-edged sword there because I wanted to hear an alpha answer, but I also like hearing I'm part of a bigger group of system here. But then immediately after the Combine, I believe is when we started learning that Elko was going to put his hands a little bit more on the defensive front. And I was like, okay, if something was missing from a cohesion standpoint or playing fast or responsibility standpoint that maybe was throwing people off, it feels like that's a reason why Elko would be a little bit more hands-on with it. And that, to me, is a sign, if I already believe in the offense, and I trust Elko to do the right things to make the adjustments on that side, on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and I'll say that, look, Shamar knows way better than I do about what was happening across the street and about the confines of the defense. But we're talking about multiple defensive coordinators. DJ Durkin had them as well. And he didn't put up monster numbers.
Right.
There may be something to it. And sometimes it is exactly that, right? I think you had guys playing in multiple positions and maybe where there isn't a lot of shine. When you bring in a Nick Gordon, he's going to be able to do what he wants to do. But I think Shamar's going to be fine at the NFL level. Sometimes, I don't want to say you're better with less talent. And I don't know, this defense may have just as much talent. We may be talking about Rylan Kennedy in a way that, or Marco Jones, the freshman, the way we've talked about all these guys. We just got to see it. That there are others on this defense last year that really shined at moments, but they just didn't have the extended play. And I think we'll see that this year. I really do think we'll see it. There's guys that are going to be thrust into a position as opposed to being situational pass rushers. They're going to be in a position to be able to go make those plays. But everything, it goes back to what I said a few minutes ago. It's still a TBD because until I see it, I don't believe it. But I can make the case for why it should work. Can you make a case for why it won't? Absolutely. You lose Nick Gordon, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. Hard to, like I asked my LSU friends, why are you guys going to be better if your offensive line? You got two guys that went in day 1 and 2 of the draft. Why will you be better? They're saying, well, those guys didn't really produce towards the end of the year. Well, same thing. Nick Gordon, Shamar Turner, and Shamar Stewart didn't really produce at the end of the year. So if you can make an argument for LSU being better, I think I can make the argument for A&M. I just got to see it.
Well, and none of those guys were going number 4 overall or whatever. So quickly here, I want to let you go with a playoff question, but make sure you swing by ML Rose if you're in Nashville. Of course, all you great SEC fans, they've got an SEC sandwich because, branding on Saturday mornings. Their brunch menu is spectacular. So if you're watching baseball, basketball, college football, no matter what, you're coming in for the summertime. They've got a great Saturday and Sunday brunch menu, 2-for-1 specials as well. They got trivia. They got happy hour at night. So come on by. 6 great locations, best craft beer menu in the city. All over Middle Tennessee. Check out our great partner, our great sponsor, keeping this show free for all of you, ML Rose. All right, so I agree with your point about how jumbled and crazy and bizarre the SEC could be this year. I think there are 3 or 4 at the top. If you want to go Texas, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, in whatever order you might think, your mileage may vary on how good you think LSU or Bama is going to be, but I think those 4 are the top 4. But the truth of the matter is I think literally anybody could be next. South Carolina, Florida, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Ole Miss, maybe even Auburn, throw Missouri in there, throw Oklahoma in there. All of them have interesting quarterback situations. All of them seem like they might be better with the exception of Ole Miss and Tennessee. I think this is like a 9-3 team that's a game or a quarter away from either making the playoff or just missing. What are how do fans view the expectations for this season? Because that could also be playoffs could be a year early for year number 2 with Mike Elko. So where would 9-3 and being like number 16 in the nation, how would that land on people?
I think it would land great because it's been I think I don't want to get caught up in message board thinking because message board thinking right now is, we're an 8-4 team, right? That's unfortunately because of the way as I mentioned earlier, the other sports have kind of brought down the mood. I am kind of I was more bullish last year than I am this year to start the season. When they were 7-1, how could you not be bullish on them, sure. Right? I look at those road games and I'm like, can you get one of them? Can you get Notre Dame? I think they can get Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's got questions, right? They have to have questions. They're not 1,000% sure about their quarterback situation. So can they get 1 or 2 of those road games? Can you look? I think Texas, they've got all this talent, but they've got new talent. They're replacing a lot. And I know everybody's anointed Arch, and I think Arch seems to be a great guy, very likable, but he's got to do it when SEC teams are scouting for him. And that's a whole different question. But he's got the pedigree, he's got the size, he's got the athleticism. Can you get 1 or 2 of those road games? Can you beat Notre Dame at South Bend? I think you can. Got to see it. I think you can. Can you go to Baton Rouge and win? You came super close a couple times in the last few years, but you've come up short. And again, it goes back 31 years since you've won in Baton Rouge. That's a big TBD. And then the Texas game at the end of the year, they've gotten you the last couple times. That game last year, there's 2 ways to look at it. You were a 4th and 1 for making it very interesting in the fourth quarter. You also your defense held them to 17 points, which was great. But if you watch that game, you could see that they were moving the ball left and right, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get one or two of those games on the road, then you've got a whole serve at home. And I think those are very winnable games at home. Florida's got a lot of talent, grueling schedule. How are they going to be when they come to Kyle Field? Do you have one for South Carolina? Because they put one on you last year, and they're going to be good this year. Are they as good? Are they going to catch people off guard? Is, no Rocket Sanders, the wide receiver situation? I think Lenore Sellers is awesome, but is he that guy that he's getting a lot of praise as maybe the 1A, the 1B? So if you can, and then Auburn, you should have never lost last year, regardless.
Right.
Can you be 9-3? Yeah, you can. But I'm going to keep, and I would be very happy with 9-3. That was your original question. I think our fans would be very happy.
Yeah.
We all want double-digit wins. I am in the minority here, but I think most A&M fans look at 2020 as a 10-win season. You went with 9-1. You won 90% of your games, and it was all SEC schedule. But it's been forever since you've won 10 games. All right, so 9, I think, would be a great step in the right direction. Great, you would feel awesome entering year 3 with Coach Elko. But I want to be at a point, and I know our fans do too. Alabama thinks 9-3 is a bad year. Completely different program, completely different history. But I want to get to a point where 9-3 is like, all right, we didn't have it this year. That's what I want A&M to get to.
It's also possible with that schedule that if you lose 3 road games inside the top 6 or 8 or 10, and your only 3 losses are to 3 playoff teams in the top 6, Notre Dame, LSU, Texas, that could be the first 9-3 resume that is good enough to get into the playoff. Like that could be the first one of its kind. So, David, always a pleasure, my guy. ML Rose, of course, Texags. Tell everybody where they can find you. Promote all your stuff, my guy.
Yeah, well, it's David. I think I'm David Nuno on Twitter. Man, I have become so bad on social media. I tweet at games and I tweet during events, but at David Nuno, I'm on Instagram and Texags.com. We do a daily show. You can watch it on YouTube. You can watch it locally, and you can hear it locally as well. But if you're watching in Nashville, I love when other fans sample our stuff, and the trolls, I come back at you too. So,
David, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us some time. I do appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Braden. Take care, buddy.